JP, can we have the countdown, please, and also unmute Zoom?
Hello all and welcome to the special city council meeting. Today is Monday, March 30th, 2026. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Clark,
Here.
Councilmember Mayor,
Here.
Councilmember Nomura,
Here.
Vice Mayor Solorzano,
Here.
and Mayor Alarcon.
Here. And if you are willing and able, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And we will now move on to our first item, which is the mid-year capital improvement plan update and appropriations adjustments.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, Council, and community members. I'm going to get us started off with just a quick overview of our agenda, and then this presentation will be given tonight in team approach with our Public Works Director, John Lawson. We'll go over our projects and updates, and our Administrative Services Director, Lisette Maldonado, will talk about any budget changes or updates. And then Jeanette Gann, our Parks, Recreation, and Community Services Director, will talk about some upcoming projects. I'll finish with some key takeaways and then be available for questions and answers. So if we can go to the first slide. Just a quick review. So we're going to start off with begin with education on what a CIP is. And then again, CIP is a capital improvement plan, or also capital improvement program is the fund that our monies come out of for our projects. Also capital improvement projects, so various Ps for the CIP. We're going to talk about how they're funded and how the projects are created. For council, this will be a refresher, but for others joining the conversation, this will be important and helpful information in reviewing the slides to follow. We'll then follow with updates on current projects as stated, the mid-year budget, and then finish with those key takeaways. So with that, John, you want to go to the next slide? Yes, with that, I'm going to turn it over to John Lawson on some of the education components.
Thank you, Michael. First off, on behalf of city staff, we do appreciate City Council in participating in the capital projects tour last week. We didn't bring you all at once, but we made sure that we accommodated your individual schedules. And no, there was not a Brown Act violation, just to let you know. We brought you individually to these project sites, and thank you for that. The second thing is, this is kind of like an opening credits recognition as well. I do like to recognize the rest of city staff, including the city manager, Lisette Maldonado, Jeanette Grant, Pamela Greer, Julissa Briones, and Stephen Downs. Just like Michael mentioned, this particular, a capital project, like any capital, is a team approach, and this is no different. The packaging of this staff report, including the PowerPoint presentation, was a team approach, and if it wasn't for the aforementioned city staff members, I believe this PowerPoint presentation is a great aesthetic and is easy to read, succinct, that you will find. And last but not least, I do want to introduce you to our Public Works Department staff. This is the core group that in the front row seats that actually do the work. Yes, the CIP is not just by me. So as far as the core group, this is the particular staff members who are working on implementing the capital improvement plan. And they are here as well. Should you have any particular questions about a project, we have Delaney Millar, our environmental program manager. She is the project manager for the Carpinteria Living Shoreline Project. Tatiana is, I would call her the assistant project manager because she's in support of that project. We have Shay Darrington, our engineering technician. He is the project manager of 2 capital projects, which is the Linden Avenue Improvements Project and the Carpinteria High School Area Crosswalk Safety Improvement Project. And last but not least, Josefina Arechiga, our assistant engineer. She is project manager of the Franklin Creek Trail Improvement Project and various internal projects, especially for the library. So with that, without further ado, we're moving on to the next slide. What is the CIP? Just like City Manager mentioned, we're going to be using that acronym a lot throughout this presentation. CIP is a capital improvement plan. And interchangeably, we have the Capital Improvements Program Fund. So for the context of this slide and in regards to the educational part of this agenda, I'm just going to refer as CIP because Lisette Maldonado will talk about the Capital Improvements Program budget. So CIP, that is a long-term roadmap for planning projects. It is the basis of our budget because it also has cost estimates. They're really rough order of magnitude cost estimates, but it's a roadmap that shows us what infrastructure is required to be built and how do we know what is required. And various different documents, including policies, documents such as master plans, specific plans, even feasibility studies. Those particular documents substantiate a capital project in the CIP. So in your staff report, I did mention the history of the CIP, and I'm just going to read a little bit about that. In August, just a refresher, August 2022 was the last CIP update, and that CIP is a 5-year CIP. And that CIP also serves another purpose. It also provides the substantiation or the nexus to charging development impact fees, if you recall that, development impact fees. So this CIP update is not about the nexus study, but I wanted to bring it to your attention again that the CIP is the basis of our development impact fees. Now, 3 steps of CIP development. I mentioned about the 5-year plan, and that is really the broadest, like I mentioned. That CIP is the basis of our budget. Yes, it'll have cost estimates, and even when you go to the CIP now, the 5-year CIP in our website, by the way, you could download it. You could already tell the costs are more than likely outdated. But that's okay. At the time, it was used to make sure that when we budget for capital projects, it is in the CIP. And those numbers have changed into the costs because of inflation. Step 2 in the CIP development. Every 2 years, there's a budget cycle list and projects that, our fiscal year budget is a 2-year budget. And just like step 2 indicates, it just confirms the funding of that particular project. Lastly, step 3, which is most specific, and this as step 3 is actually tonight, it's mid-year adjustments. So what's before you after this educational part of the agenda, as well as project status updates, we get to turn it over and go over you line by line item of what particular appropriations adjustments is required. So step 1, we've already done that with the 5-year CIP. Step 2, we've already done that through our fiscal year, our 2-year cycle fiscal year budget. We are now basically in step 3, and you'll be hearing that soon in this presentation. How are capital projects funded? I get this question all the time. City staff gets this question all the time. It all depends upon the type of funding we have for those projects. And there are 3 categories or types: discretionary, semi-restrictive, and restrictive. On the slide, I show you what is considered discretionary. It's basically your general fund. That can only be used for any city project service, and city council actually decides how it is allocated. The orange category is semi-restricted, and your examples are your development impact fees or special taxes, state funding, and it's restricted to a specific project. That's why it's semi-restrictive, but the city chooses which projects. So these development impact fees, for example, we get development impacts fee through highways and streets, thoroughfares. Remember that particular category in the development impact fee? We get those development impact fees, but we, the city, we decide what to use those development impact fees for. In that case, it would be the Carpinteria Avenue Bridge Replacement Project, and we'll get to that project as well. And the most restrictive, are your grants, bonds, and shares. Those are specifically approved to a project. Like, for example, we don't have any particular bonds, but grants. A grant is the Highway Bridge Program. I use that as an example. HBP, Highway Bridge Program. That is a grant, a federal grant, specific to the Carpinteria Avenue Bridge Replacement Project, not for a road or pavement, or not for a park. So that's a good example as a grant that is very restrictive.
I have a question.
Yes.
You gave that example for that grant. When did we apply and when did we receive that grant? Just because I think it's important for the public to understand, as well as council, how long it can take once you apply and then once construction, or design, construction, and then when the project is complete.
Yes, Mayor Aracon, good question. That grant was actually before my time, and I arrived in 2019. I believe when I was talking to Councilmember Clark the other day when we visited, well, kind of talked about that project. He's like, oh yeah, John, that project has been on the books for at least 15 years. And to your question, I'd like to say, and don't quote me on this, I'd like to say it was like maybe around the 2012, 2013 timeframe. Mm-hmm. So it is an old grant. We've been extending it through Caltrans. Caltrans is the holder of that money on behalf of the Federal Highway Administration through as a designee of federal funds. I'm going to keep going, but I will pause, and because I do welcome any questions along the presentation, even though there's a Q&A at the end. But feel free, council members, there's only one agenda item for tonight. So feel free to ask questions. I'll pause between slides until you could ask your questions. How are capital projects made? So we have a particular 5-step process, and every capital project follows the same path, whether it be a park project, a library project, or even a bridge project, pavement project. We go through these particular steps. Step 1, the need is identified. And how is the need identified? I mentioned about the 5-year CIP. And how is this 5-year CIP developed? Through substantiating documents, like your master plan or feasibility study. Then we go to a step 2, which is planning, not in the sense of planning as in our planning division of our community development department. It's planning for defining the scope of the work and estimating the cost. Fine tuning, so to say, from what the CIP says is, okay, we have the CIP, 5-year CIP, let's fine tune that number for planning purposes, because it'll be around the planning step where we typically apply for grants, because we have to refine those numbers from the 5-year CIP to get cost estimates probably to today's dollars to apply for a grant. And this is also where we set or schedule the project in terms of those phases. If you recall in past CIP study sessions, there's 3 phases: design, right-of-way, and construction. So the planning phase, we have to estimate cost for that, as well as estimating the time frame of a project. Going on to step 3, this is where the Public Works Department works hand in hand, well, Public Works and Parks and Recreation Services Department works hand in hand with our Administrative Services Department in budgeting and funding. Our city manager is also involved in that process as well. So we have this particular project, we plan for it, we apply for grants for it. Now we have to program it in our budget, or our capital improvements program fund. So once we secure funding and we program it in our capital improvements program fund, then we start the design. This is where the nuts and bolts come in. Your step 4, engineers, architects, create detailed plans, specification, and estimates. And then we're continuing fine-tuning the estimate. And then the last step is the fun stuff, in my opinion, the construction, because we're going to see this particular project come into fruition and physically have this built. Any questions on this particular slide?
Yeah, yeah, thank you. At what point does this, would this project, and at what point in the process would that be brought to the city council to determine whether the public has an appetite for it or not?
Very good question through the mayor and council member Clark. So it would definitely be around 1 and 2. Okay, so our 5-year CIP is basically set, and then hopefully in the next update of the 5-year CIP, we're going to get your input on this one, and we're going to provide you, city staff is going to provide you information of the substantiation of the particular project. So your input really comes into step number 1, the need for it. And we will walk you, or will guide you through why is it needed. And to your comment or question is, do we have the appetite for it? So the next 5-year CIP, unfortunately, I wasn't really involved too much in a lot of these projects before my time. However, we are making the improvements, and we're getting more public input involved more than ever in these type of projects. And that's actually one of our strategic goals, is to do public outreach, get people's input on capital projects. Public Works Department of old are not just building stuff out there. Public Works of new, so to say, is getting people's input as coming to your council.
I have a somewhat related question about that, or comment and question. So I really appreciate the number 1, the need identified, and that's something that I want to do a better job as council and the city in communicating that step, because I think people aren't always clear about why certain projects are chosen to move forward. And so even in the last slide where you had about restricted funds and then general funds, it's so important for us to, which I think we do more now, to talk about what those trade-offs are, because whether or not, even if the public doesn't have an appetite for a specific project, if not doing that project would then maybe put the city at more of a legal risk, or would conflict with state or federal regulations. That's something I know that's so important for us to be able to communicate to the public, because unfortunately it's not always about what project we want to do the most, but maybe which one we need to do for a lot of different reasons. And I mean, just as an example, sometimes it should be the projects that everybody supports the most, but I appreciate hearing more about the nuance of how these projects get chosen.
Thank you, Vice Mayor, through the mayor. Well spoken, and I know I'm aware, city staff is aware of council's education on these type of funds. And for the benefit of the group, I just went back to this particular slide, and Vice Mayor, that you are accurate in those words. The type of funds we received, that we apply for, really, the grants especially, tie into semi or restrictive. So what that means is, like I mentioned, we can't use it for anything else. Linden Avenue Improvements Project, I like to give that as probably the number 1 example, because I'm picking on it, is Circulation Improvements Fund. That is a measure of money from the Highway 101 corridor project that was a monetary compensation to the city to provide for alternative transportation. It is not for pavement. So that is an example of what you mentioned. Like, yeah, a lot of people have a conception or perception that, oh, why are we using these funds? Where we could be using it for pavement. Because of these categories, it's either follows orange or the red, semi-restricted and restricted, and that's the reason why. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Vice Mayor Solorzano, to the mayor. I thought it would be good to maybe pass along a story from our tours that kind of ties in with what you were saying. So one of the times we were out there looking at the Linden Avenue Improvements Project, one of the neighbors from across the street came over. And coincidentally, at that time, something dangerous had just happened. I think an e-bike cut off a car or something. And he was just talking about how unsafe that particular area was and how that project has made it a lot safer, how much he appreciated the project. I've heard that one of the reasons that project was being looked into early on is that there was a couple of accidents because the bike lane used to be the same place where the trash cans went out for the neighbors, and as bikes would dodge the trash cans, there was a couple accidents where they were clipped by cars. And I think because of the length of these projects, one of the things that we want to get better at is not just getting the community input up front, but continuing to tell the story along the process, because at one point in time, I think people had a clear idea of why that project was being done, but because it takes sometimes several years for these to get done, down the road, people may not remember what the reasoning for that was. And so I just thought that was a great story to have that neighbor come out at that time and share those remarks with us, and then remembering why that project was done in the first place.
Okay, council members, our next slide is basically our capital improvements program budget at a glance. Right now, we have total of 11 active projects. 6 are in design and 5 are in the construction phase. And we've summarized we've broken down or segregated the categories of projects. As you can see, parks, trails, and recreation, we have 4 that are active, and that's the adopted budget of 3.1 million, more or less. Same thing for streets, bridges, pedestrian facilities, 8.7 million. Facilities and environmental, 3 active projects at 700,000. The next subsequent slides are going to be now the project status of these particular projects. So thought I'd share you some statistics before we get on to the status updates.
Quick question. You mentioned in the previous slide about the 5-year CIP. Where are we in that? When is a new one expected to be developed?
Yes, Mayor, we are in the fiscal year 25-26 period. So this 5-year CIP goes all the way up to fiscal year 26-27. So it started in fiscal year 22-23. So this 5-year, so we are in the fiscal year 25-26 period.
Got it.
Yes.
So then, and just another question also, just in terms of the previous slide, in terms of identifying need, because I do think there are a handful of CIP projects that we've just inherited, because similar to my question earlier was we received a grant back in 2012, but now there could be an opportunity to potentially to have the public maybe come up with new ideas of CIP projects. So one idea that's kind of always been floating around was a potential small park. And I do think the city did try to apply for a grant, but we didn't receive the grant. But my point is, in saying this, is how can we involve the public when we create the next 5-year CIP plan? And then from there, of course, there's the assessment of whether we're pursuing CIP projects because of safety reasons, or I guess in my mind, I'm seeing it as different, like safety and then like for fun. And then there's some that it's like we have to be reactive because we have to address certain concerns, for example, like the pool. And so how do we, as we come up for the next 5-year, how can we, what is the plan to involve some of the public to get some new ideas?
Mayor, I'll take that question. So one of the things of the 5-year CIP that we want to get better at is tying it specifically to funding. And so one of the reasons why you might only have emergent needs or grant-funded projects within that 5 years is because theoretically, that 5 years is tied specifically to funding that we've thought forward. Now, because of our specific funding position where we don't have enough money to fund the 5 years, it has become more of a pick 'em as they become available, which isn't where we want to be in the long term. They don't necessarily have to wait 5 years, as you're going to kind of hear from Jeanette later, as we're talking about some projects that might be coming up next year. And I don't want to steal her thunder, but things like the dog park and stuff that have come up. You don't necessarily have to wait for the 5 year. The importance of the 5 year is it's with the Nexus study and how it's tied to our development impact fees. We're not going to want to every year add projects and then go back and do that study to update our development impact fees because it's intensive and costly. And so ideally, you're thinking 5 years ahead, and you are adding things as you get to that point. But then you're flexible enough with grant funding, and if something important pops up, to be able to add that. And so, I guess to answer your question, you don't necessarily have to wait the 5 year cycle. I can't remember when things like the dog park popped up, but I think they were very much organic, and I don't think it was on any sort of a timeline. But ideally, right, if it's going to require a lot of development impact fees, it would be, on the cycle of the 5 years. Did I answer all your questions there?
Yes,
Okay.
you did. Thank you.
And I think I would add as a follow-up, something that came up for me was that in terms of the public being more involved, I think it's really helpful when they're able to advocate for a project, both with time and with potentially with finances. I think about the skate park. I think about the dog park, where those are examples where residents were really invested in it. And so they either did some of the fundraising or put in the time, like Sea Dog is doing right now with the dog park. And so I think that that's a really important thing for the public to make sure that they're thinking about the ways that they can get involved, given that we do have such a limited budget. And it seems like if we wanted more projects, we'd have to have more revenue coming in, right? So that we could dedicate more money to that. And when things like, what the assessment districts don't pass, those are other revenue sources that are not there. So I think that the part of the public involvement has to also be the public's education of understanding why we're limited with the CIP and why we can't add on projects as much as we might really like to.
Yeah, thank you for those comments, Vice Mayor Solorzano, and through the mayor. John mentioned earlier about the master plans. And so you'll go to some cities and they have a master parks plan, a master recreation plan. And one of the reasons for that is to avoid a situation that we're in and wanting to work to get out of, which is where every time funding becomes available, it's pickleball versus dog park versus a new field. And when you do a parks master plan, you have all of that engagement, you have all of the people there, and you may not have your project done first, but there's a master plan that puts an order to things so that people can get behind supporting, priority A because they know B is somewhere there in the plan. And so that's another place we're wanting to get, where what you're talking about is what eventually is the seed for a master plan, where we're thinking these things through more long term. And I promise you, we're working on trying to get there too.
Our first project update is the Rincon Multi-Use Trail Project. You'll see similar slides like this for the next capital projects, and I'm going to clarify this, not necessarily this just for this project, but for the subsequent slides that follow. So you'll see scope of work, the objective of that project, the particular status of that project, the current phase where that project is in, the target completion or estimated completion of the project. Though it says current phase, it's going to be the target completion of the project itself. The total estimated costs, that is not the current phase, but it's the three different phases as applicable that sums to that particular total cost estimate or total estimated cost. So for example, that total estimated cost comprises the design, right-of-way, and construction phases. So with that, Rincon Multi-Use Trail Project, this particular project is an important piece to bridge the gap, so to say, of the California Coastal Trail. So the California Coastal Trail is a statewide trail from Northern California, Southern California, and vice versa. So this is one of the gaps that we in the Carpinteria community has the fortunate being fortunate to have this project situated within our jurisdictional boundaries. I like to say it's probably an honor to have the California Coastal Vista Trail come through the Carpinteria community. And the objective, like I mentioned, to close the gap, continue to closing the gaps of the California Coastal Trail. It is currently technically in design, though it's suspended. However, city manager, myself, and Caltrans, we're leveraging funds to continue on with the environmental document. And if you haven't heard, we also, through the help of SBCAG staff, we have applied for additional fundings of about $2 million, actually it's $2 million maximum, towards the design of this project. So the Caltrans funding is separate from the $2 million. The Caltrans funding is, I would say this is additional funding of that in order for Caltrans to close the books of the Highway 101 corridor projects. They have this additional funding they are offering the city, so to say, and we are going through a negotiation. I believe we are in the MOU phase right now, memorandum of understanding between the city and Caltrans. And the $2 million, like I mentioned, it's separate, but SBCAG has applied on behalf of this project to Senator Schiff's office to apply for $2 million to go towards the design of this project. So we have two potential funding sources, outside funding sources. This particular side, and just like other ones for the project, is a condensed, succinct version of the spreadsheets that we look at, but created a particular table here that shows the expenditure categories that goes into this particular project. At the bottom, if you notice, we have the funding source. So this particular project is Measure X monies and grant money. So the grant monies, i.e., we consider the funding from Caltrans and federal dollars hopefully from Senator Schiff to be grant monies. So, but Measure X is our local share or local participation cost towards this project. Any questions on the Rincon Trail before I move on to the Bluffs 2 Trail project?
So this grant is for the design phase or the environmental phase, or,
Yes.
and then you said earlier that the environmental, you're going to get a grant for $2 million?
Oh, yes. I'll explain, and then the senior manager, Michael Ramirez, will maybe clarify it some more if I cannot. So basically, the funds from Caltrans that we're seeking funds through an MOU, that it will be towards the environment, finishing off the environmental document. And the $2 million, the one that SBCAG has submitted to Senator Schiff's office, that will be towards the plans and specifications, so to say, of this project. So we have an environmental document and we have plans and specifications. Same phase, design phase, but we just don't have the funds to continue on with the environmental document. So that's why Caltrans has this particular offer on the table. Here's the funds through an MOU to finish off your environmental document.
So can I ask a question about the environmental document? So the environmental document, which is probably like an environmental review, impact report, right?
Councilmember Mayor, yes, that is. It's what we call the Focused Environmental Impact Report. We called it focus because it was a certain part of the project that was focused in regards to the concerns by the, correct me if I'm wrong, Michael, the gliding community? Yes.
And it's already been started but not completed.
Correct.
And I mean, how much of it has been done? Just curious.
Yes, this probably warrants a little bit more history considering this has before your time as well, Councilmember Mayor. So your city council initially had an appeal brought before them regarding the certification of Planning Commission certified environmental impact report. It came to your city council, well, before your time, the city council upheld a particular appeal from the gliding community. However, the city council at the time directed staff to work with the gliding community and come up with alternatives. And I believe it was March 2022, staff came back to city council with information, and it was at that time council directed staff to go with a particular alternative or move forward with a particular alternative called Alternative 3. For more information about the Rincon Trail project, we actually still have that in our city website, information about that. So yes, that's in a nutshell what has happened and where we're at right now.
Okay, thanks.
Bluffs 2 Trail project, I'm going to speak to this a little bit, but the champion of this project is our very own Parks and Recreation Community Services Director, Jeanette Gant. So the scope of the work really is because of the acquisition of an easement behind SNS Seeds. So this is still private property, but the city was able to acquire a permanent easement to situate this particular project on that particular property. I guess you could say it's part of the Bluffs Trail system. It will be part of the Bluffs Trail system. We actually have a design, and the current phase is technically we are able to go to a shovel-ready project. And through the generous funding of the County of Santa Barbara, I believe it's $800,000, this particular project, as well as other Bluffs project, should be able to move forward. But this one here, this has been in the books as well. This is actually state funding involved. Right now, the status is delayed because before the $100,000, we didn't have sufficient funding. We did have funding for the design. Now that the design is finished for this project, we're basically at a shovel-ready project. We actually have, correct me if I'm wrong, Jeanette, we have permits already? Yeah.
Yes, thank you. My understanding is the project is fully permitted through Community Development Department, so the next step would be permitting through Public Works and a few other items. But it has been approved by the Planning Commission in 2022. And just to add a little bit more clarification, if you don't mind, John, there is the previous Parks, Recreation, and Community Service Director did obtain a grant for part of this project as well. Again, it was before my time here with the city, but we do have some funding as well as some Tidelands funds that could be used to go towards this project.
And I'm sorry, just a question of clarification. So you mentioned the $850,000 from the county. Is that allocated towards this project? Because I recall with those dollars, it could also be an opportunity to purchase some land, or am I?
800,000, right?
Yes, Mayor Alcon, the $800,000 from the County of Santa Barbara is, but we have an agreement with them and it can be used for a number of things on any Bluffs property. So yes, it could be used for things such as acquisition, maintenance of existing Bluff property, development of trails either here for Bluffs 2 or for Bluffs 3, aka Rincon Bluffs. So there's a wide variety of things that the 800,000 can be used for. As long as it, of course, is specific to the Bluffs. And it is the first 200,000 we will get from the county in May, and then the 200,000 after that, or leading up to the 8, will be on a reimbursement basis only. And there is a time limit on when we must use those funds. I believe it's 2029, or thereabouts, that we must use all the funds, or we would lose them.
And so in terms of allocation of all those funds, and it sounds like is the first 200 going to be automatically allocated to this project?
No, Mayor Alarcon, we would first use the grant funds that Matt Roberts obtained. We still have those. Then we would use the Tidelands funds that were allocated to this project. If additional funds were needed, we could tap into that $800,000. But there is a number of steps with using those $800,000, which we would need to go through. We would present any project to COSMAB, our Carpinteria Open Space Management Advisory Body, and then to your council for any approval that the city manager would need to authorize to enter into any agreements. But we are hopeful that the current grants that Matt was able to obtain in the Tidelands Fund could cover most, if not all, of the project. Or if there's some things that could be changed slightly, we would look into that as well.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that clarification. And just my other question, this was really helpful to do the tours because it really gave me a good visual in terms of what this trail could potentially look like. And just a part of our conversation was potentially how we could decrease the amount of dollars we would be using for this trail. And so one idea was, or one point of conversation was staff potentially doing some of the work. Can you share a little bit about that? Not necessarily staff doing the work, but just the thinking of alternatives out of the box as opposed to having.
Yeah, Mayor Alarcon, definitely I think there's rooms we could adapt the project. I would want to make sure it was still as approved by the Planning Commission. Any big changes, we would need to go back and be quite the process. But for example, there was some landscaping planned. As you saw on the tour, and anyone who's enjoyed that trail, the landscaping may not be necessary and there could be some cost savings there. In regards to city staff doing the actual physical labor, I would have to defer to Public Works, as I'm not sure. There is the building of a fence, a portion of a retaining wall that I believe would have to be contracted out.
Right.
And yeah, so I'll let John take it from here.
Thank you, Jeanette. I believe you're asking about capacity, staff capacity, or what tasks that the city can do. Right now, I don't have those details, but I could probably speak to capacity, staff capacity. Right now, you see our core group here in front of you. There's only so much we could take on. Right now, I don't even have a designated project manager amongst this group here. It could be very well me. There's also contemplation about a project manager, a consultant to help with the staff. It's basically staff augmentation to help shepherd this project, because these Bluffs project, now that we have this funding, needs a dedicated member, whether it be a team member, whether it be a city staff or a consultant. Right now, I just don't have, I still have to talk to our city manager, Jeanette, how we're going to be taking on this particular project. But to your question, is like, what can the city do to offset costs? I believe right now I don't have those particular details. Perhaps maybe, I'm just thinking out loud, we could do the landscaping. City staff could do landscape. I don't know. Maybe we could utilize our existing landscape contractors to plant. Those details we haven't figured out yet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Suggestion on that one too. You also have quite a few volunteer organizations that would probably be willing to do that one. For example, the retaining wall you're talking about, the stacked stone retaining wall, stacked block, and also the planting. I've worked with the counties of Kern County and Ventura and San Luis Obispo County with volunteer staff to actually put those in place. That saves about 50% of the cost. It may be something you want to look at. We should probably do some research on that, see what the liabilities are, and see if in fact we can get basic plans, at least for the construction of these things, plant locations, things like that. If the plans are done, I can see implementation easily being done by volunteer staff.
Councilor Romero, that's actually, it's one of the things that's not off the table. Those particular ideas are great. What comes to mind is the California Conservation Corps. That's another one that the state of California provides at no cost really to the city. We just get in touch with them. They provide the volunteers. We also have a great volunteer community here. But yes, it's something that we could look into. And there's, when it comes to volunteers, there's a risk management component to that as well, because they're volunteers and they would have to sign waivers and whatnot, things like that, like any other program that we have that utilizes volunteers.
Yeah, the reason I brought that up also, I supervised a team that did, close to $500,000 with the landscape projects in Kern County specific, all based on volunteer service. At the end of the time, we actually even ended up having the plants paid for with outside sources and funding too. So that went to $500,000 to zero. Something to think about.
And then I'll just quickly mention, I spoke with the Botanic Garden and their efforts in moving to focusing more on conservation. And I think that they would be willing to offer some of their expertise and it could be a really great partnership.
Thank you, council members. Those are well noted. Thank you. Bluffs 2, just to touch on the funding source again, Tideland Trust Fund, and we mentioned about the grants. We consider the $800,000 funding a grant. Okay. Moving on to the Carpinteria Living Shoreline Project. This particular project the impetus of this project stemmed from the Dune and Shoreline Management Plan. So you had, I mentioned about master plans. Dune and Shoreline Management Plan is in essence the master plan that recommended for a living shoreline project. So hence, we have the Carpinteria Living Shoreline Project. And the objective here is to protect the landward resources and critical infrastructure in the beach neighborhood. Basically, what you see, what the winter protection berm does right now, this ultimately will take its place. In the meantime, this is still in the design phase as the current phase. However, it's still at the beginning of that design phase. So we still have a ways to go. The target completion, I just realized this, Delaney, but I did not update the spring 2027 target completion date. It's summer 2028. So I apologize for that. Total estimated cost, right now it's at 1.8 million as far as project costs. Like I mentioned, the project manager, the environmental program manager, Delaney Millar, is here. Should you have any questions, she's very intimately involved in this project, so she knows the ins and outs of what's happening right now. Should you have any questions regarding the project.
Actually, I do have a question, comment, and possibly get some answers back on that one. Recently, we posed forward an assessment that was a potential one that we were looking at for the shoreline area. That would be for sea level rise. How would that have affected this project, and were we going to overlap those funds since this was already on the board?
Yeah, Councilmember Noir, this project, my understanding is that the funds that could have come in for that assessment district for the winter berm could have been used towards maintenance of the living shoreline.
I have a quick question. How much does the design of the living shoreline reduce the capacity of the city beach?
So that's a great question. We don't know at this time. So part of this design process is figuring out what's feasible, and the goal is to maintain the wide sandy beach, and we wanted to have a nature-based solution. So we want it to look nice as well. So it'll likely be like a restored dune system. But right now we're really early in the design phase, so we don't have any conceptual designs. But that's the goal for the project.
I think it would be easy for the public to sort of just assume that it would be like the winter berm, but in more of like a dune.
Yeah.
The winter berm does take up a lot of the beach, so
Yeah, and
that's not what we're looking at, really.
no. And I will mention unofficially now, and I encourage you all and everyone listening that we're going to be having some outreach events coming up. The official announcements will be coming really soon. Our website is going to be launched very soon as well in the next 2 or 3 weeks. The first one is going to be a pop-up at the farmers market. That's going to be on Thursday, April 16th. People are encouraged to come. They can meet the project team. Another really important part of this project is we really want the public's input. So for the first event, it's kind of just talking about the project, meeting the team, kind of just having conversations. And then we're going to have a workshop that's scheduled right now for Saturday, April 25th from 2 to 4 at the Vets Hall. And that's going to be more of a forum where people can talk about how they use the beach, how they want the beach to be preserved, what their priorities are for this project, and they can talk to the project team about the project and potential designs and really give input on how they would want this project to look. So that's really important at this phase, and the earlier people can give their input, the better. We're hoping to have at least 6 community workshops, and I would love to see you guys there as well. Thank you.
Another quick question I have for you. On the same project we're taking a look at, currently the League of California Cities, coastal counties specifically, are facing and working on the loss of sand and loss of beaches in Southern California. That being said, one of the few areas that is not seeing this erosion of sand is Santa Barbara and Carpinteria, only because they are south-facing beaches. That being said, I believe there's a potential that we could actually put in place and probably get some financing in the long run by saying that we will be a repository or basically retain as much of the sand here in this area as we can, because as it sloughs downward, it's going more south. That being said, I believe if we work together with the rest of the League of California Cities, coastal counties specifically, everybody's losing sand but us. So I think we may have the possibility of actually getting some monies for us to retain the sand. Something to think about.
Thank you. Yeah, that's something we can definitely explore. It's my understanding that our city beach is also losing sand, so that's something that we can look into too. We also work with other organizations like Beach Smart and other projects where the main topic is the loss of sand. So that's definitely top of mind. That is an interesting point that you bring up, though, because I know a lot of places are struggling to find places where they can source sand. So I can talk with our project team and see where they are in terms of planning for that. But thank you for your question. That's
Sure.
really interesting.
One example of that is the still required need for dredging in the Santa Barbara Harbor.
Yes.
Just to show we have an excess.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Sure.
Madam Mayor, council members, moving on to this particular side, so this is a grant-funded project, fully, as far as the design phase goes, it's fully funded through a coastal conservancy grant of about $1.6 million, an example of restrictive category type grant. Franklin Creek Trail Improvement Project. I mentioned our project manager here, Josefina Arechiga, as well. Should you have any particular questions about the features of this project? The photo here, or the image, it's for disclaimer purposes. This is really a artistic imagination or a rendering of the trail. Though it appears to be asphalt concrete trail, the actual plans call for what they call a pervious concrete, a type of surfacing. That pervious concrete surfacing Really, it's for stormwater quality purposes, and it also provides a rigid type of surface for the county of Santa Barbara to use. And recall, this particular project is situated on a county parcel. The reason why this project has been permitted to be situated on a county parcel because your city council and the county board of supervisors have jointly executed a secondary use agreement for this project. So what that means is this project is not only situated on a county parcel, but we have full maintenance responsibility of the existing landscaping and the proposed landscaping and the hardscaping, which we would actually rather have. We have, in my opinion, we do a better job in maintaining what the county would in this particular area. So this project is funded, a majority of the funds are outside funding, and those particular funding sources are Measure A, competitive grants, both Measure A, the bicycle and pedestrian grant of Measure A, and then the Safe Route to School Measure A competitive grant. In addition to those local grants, we also have leveraged federal aid money, believe it or not, federal aid money, Community Development Block Grant from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. This particular project received most of the CDBG money when it initially applied for. So this is, it was a very good project candidate or project that received a majority of the CDBG funds. And the CDBG funds is competitively applied for regionally in the county. Right now, it's technically in the construction phase. Matter of fact, tomorrow is the bid opening of this project. And you should see in the next city council meeting in April authorization to award a construction contract, pending the bid is within our budget. Again, funding sources, I mentioned about the grants. We also are supplementing the funding through development impact fees. I believe it's our parks and recreation development impact fees. Any questions regarding the Franklin Creek Trail Improvement Project?
Yeah, I do on this one too. John, on this one here, I know we saw an overview of it, basically just a top-down view, but we did not see any cut specifications. So first question I have, and I know ARB's looked at it in Planning Commission, specifically that is an area where a lot of the housing is lower than the wall of that retention area. So my question would be, is the slope of that plan actually to go into the waterway itself, or is that going to be diverted, any water that's collecting on that diverted towards the city?
Okay. I believe I could answer, but come on up, Josefina. So I mentioned about the pervious concrete, which provides for that infiltration of stormwater. And just like any stormwater quality best management practice or device, and this pervious concrete is that category, a stormwater quality best management practice. Once those have reached its capacity, you're going to have runoff. So that particular runoff is going to go majority towards the creek channel. And that was reviewed by by the county of Santa Barbara as being acceptable. As long as the stormwater quality BMP is in place and does its job to remove contaminants, mainly hydrocarbon contaminants, but we don't see a lot of contaminants coming from this project, being that it's a non-motorized trail. So in other words, probably the only thing that's motorized is county trucks or even city trucks, but those are rare for maintenance purposes. They're being used for maintenance purposes, but I could have Josefina talk a little bit about that, but for the most part, the drainage is going to go into Carpinteria Creek. Franklin Creek.
And then I would also like to add that we are doing a pervious concrete pathway, which will allow some of the water to retain and seep into the soil.
Right, that part I do understand. The reason I was curious about the actual retention of that area, I know we have there's about a 1 foot drop from the center of that to the wall of the creek area itself, the concrete retaining wall. However, on the neighboring side along the street where there is that hammerhead, that's almost 2 feet would be my guess to the bottom. So if with impervious moisture being collected there, it's going to probably pocket out and head towards the street itself instead of going through the wall of the Franklin Creek. So that was my question. I mean, pervious is definitely important. It's pretty much a necessity now. They're required in just about every municipality. But being permeable, it would then go downward, and then that would then drain subsurface towards the street area itself or the residents. So that would be my one big concern, to see if in fact that has been addressed, because it's not going to go through the wall of that creek.
Yeah. There's a combination of measures to address the concerns that you mentioned, and one of them is that we have an abundance of landscaping that you see with the sides of the trail. So we are having the water run into some of these landscaped areas with the idea that the landscape is designed to take some of this water that is being run off. A lot of the water also is being directed towards the creek itself. There's been a couple measures that we put in place, but ultimately it's pretty hard to say 100% that I can predict the water to be run off in a certain direction depending on the type of storms that we are experiencing at that moment. But measures have been in place to address those concerns.
Yeah, I know we talk about measurements being a 20-year storm as the average for the necessity. Anything more than that, you're not going to do anything about. You bring up the second question I actually had, and maybe you could help me out with this one. We also had one of the other measures that we proposed forward to vote on failed, and that had to do with the landscaping portion of that one. This one here, I did see the original plans. There was a substantial amount of landscaping in that area. My concern and question is that's going to also extend now more work for our workforce, which we're already limited to. That being said, my suggestion, recommendation would be is that we take a look at these landscape areas for an areas improvement like this and try to minimize our planting as much as we can. That makes maintenance much easier. We won't have to deal with plant growth, excessive plant growth, keeping these pathways and trailways cleared from debris, things like that is much easier if it's on a hard surface as opposed to picking debris up and trash from shrubbed areas. So you may want to take a look at that, maybe pass that on. It's something we'd want to look at for the city, because in the future, areas like this, as much as I like planting, being a landscaper, I think we're going to have to start minimizing a lot of the plant materials to make sure that we are able to handle just not only the cost, but also the maintenance in the long run.
Councilmember Nomura definitely took that note. I know we discussed it a little bit on our tour, and definitely have that note for any future design modifications.
Thank you.
I just want to follow up on Councilmember Nomura's question, and I appreciate you, Mike, sharing that. It's been noted, but I'm also curious to know if there needs to be a certain policy we put in place so that just the direction in which the council would like, if we want plants or we don't want plants, or we want native plants or drought tolerant plants. So I'm also curious to know what we need to put in place so that moving forward, it's being caught at the very beginning and not similar to kind of when we saw these plans, it was almost too late to make any modifications to what the landscape was going to look like.
Yes, Mayor, thank you for that question. So I talked at the beginning of the meeting about all the things that we are doing tonight, and I failed to talk about the things that we're not, but that we're going to be doing at an upcoming meeting. And so some of those things are going to be discussing any new discretionary projects, prioritization of projects and funding sources or strategies for reducing funding. And so at that next meeting, I think will be an excellent time for us as we talk about what our strategies are going to be for pavement, for planting, and a number of things related to our CIPs for reducing our funding moving forward. So we will definitely have that opportunity.
Perfect. Thank you.
Well, and I would think that would also have to probably be communicated to Planning Commission and ARB, because I think part of the reason that by the time it gets to us, these decisions are made is because those are the recommending bodies to us, right? So, I mean, hopefully if it is a city vision for us to have, whatever less planting or plants with less maintenance, hopefully it could start at that level. So at the ARB or Planning Commission level, so that by the time the plans were to come to us, it would already be in line with what the city's priorities are. So I don't know if that's something that maybe I know Planning Commission and ARB are supposed to be implementing council's vision, but maybe it could be something that we underscore for them going forward, especially on important factors like that.
Yeah, Vice Mayor Larson, through the mayor, yeah, point taken. We don't want, if you have an unaligned bodies there and they're looking at it from like beautification perspective, right? And we're looking at it from a cost savings perspective, and you have a lot of work that goes into all those steps, and then to have it get to say city council and we're like, no, cut all of that stuff. So I think definitely taking those messages and policies or whatever form that they take and ensuring that we're communicating them down to our various recommending bodies will be important.
Thank you.
Touching on funding source, this is grant monies, development impact fees. I would categorize this as semi-restrictive. We do have those particular grants, but we actually had the flexibility of identifying a project to use those grants for alternative transportation, which is this project. Moving on to the Linden Beach and Beautification Project, we have since dubbed it or renamed it the Linden Plaza Project. This is a particular project that grant funding was applied for, specifically state park grants, legacy type of staff work at the time that fortunately it's not a bad thing to leverage state park funds, and has gone, this particular project has been identified to use these state park funds. We are currently in the design phase, but it's more on the conceptual sub phase of the design phase, and it's particularly on track, we call it. However, this is one of those projects I recall in the tour that there's probably not too much motivation about this project, but it's still part of our CIP, and it is part of this year's fiscal year budget. So we are working on this project. Josefina Arechiga is the project manager on this. So the last time, or the latest update on this, we received feedback from state park staff, and that's where we're at right now. Now it's a matter of incorporating their input and I believe going through our own permitting process on this one, but we have not started. We actually, myself and Josefina has to sit down and see what these particular comments are all about.
If I could say a comment really quickly, I think this is a project that is a good example of some of the community outreach that the city did, that Public Works did. It was a meeting, I don't know if it was last year or might have been the year before, but there was a whole presentation down there, and there were a lot of people from the public who showed up and who gave their thoughts on landscaping and on what the different types of furniture tables that you were thinking of having there. So that's, I think, that's a good example, I think, of the way that you guys are doing that with Franklin Creek too. I remember I went to one of the open houses you had over at Aliso about that. So I appreciate that outreach, and hopefully that's also going to help catch some of the critiques before the projects move too far along.
Thank you, Vice Mayor, through the mayor. Thank you for recognizing that we do make a good deal of effort in putting into public outreach or community engagement with our capital projects. Like I mentioned, this is not the Public Works of old, Department of old. This is the Public Works of new. We're going to engage at the very beginning of concept level.
Thank you. So has the design been finished?
Councilmember Clark through the mayor, no. Actually, we are, I would say, I would probably estimate the design would be still in its infancy. It's all concept. What you see here, though it's illegible, that's basically concept in nature. So in other words, those that image there, it's not buildable yet. It's not a constructible plan. So there's no plans and specifications yet. Councilmember Clark, council members, it's all concept right now. Yeah.
And just to add a little bit more, the project, right now we're working with state parks, like John mentioned, there are some comments that we need to address. And state parks has a couple requirements that they would like us to meet. So at the moment, there's coordination happening in the background.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, question for me also on this one here. Knowing that State Parks worked with us on the playground, Tamal Interpretive Play Area, this one here is basically going to be the same. We're building this and constructing on State Park property also. My concern is, lesson learned, with the Tamal Interpretive Play Area, we now have deferred maintenance 15 years later. My suggestion or recommendation would be to also incorporate some sort of long-term planning for this one. I know some of it they wanted to have is raised deck, things like that. Those are all going to be, they're going to be vulnerable to maintenance quite a bit. Also with the sea level rise indicators, things like that showing up, we may have substantial amount of maintenance in the long run. So again, we have a plan to put this in place to build it, but I think we better be taking a look at maintenance of these also, because they're going to be vulnerable.
Councilmember Moore, to the mayor. I think that's an excellent point. I think that, moving forward, and we have had some criticism of late about various projects and things, whether it be the pool and having funding for it after all these years, and I think that it is important that as we approve projects moving forward, that we don't only think about what it costs to construct them, but what's the long-term maintenance going to be, how we're going to be able to, we'd have to use our available fund balance to put away for, whatever the, I forget the term is, the life cycle of whatever the item may be. That includes not just for special projects, but for the roof over our head right now, and a bunch of other things. And so, point taken, and I think as you all make those decisions moving forward, I'd appreciate that lens as you all are deciding what to approve and what not to approve.
One last point. Doing my job with Rotary International, I oversee about $200 million worth of projects. One of the number one things that we take a look at has to do with sustainability. 25-year plan for those. So I think as we start looking at some of these projects, we should probably look also at, quote, the sustainability of these projects, making sure that they're going to be around at least for 25 years.
I have just a quick question of maybe of education for me. So you mentioned that we're currently in the design phase, but when we went to Linden Beach, we saw it visually, and then we came back and we saw these plans, and the plans themselves seem pretty detailed. Is that common for just a concept?
Madam Mayor, yes, actually. So what you see, it's basically an image of the plans, and it hasn't gone through any permitting process. And when we submit it through a permitting process, i.e. through our community development department, the project plans have to be at a level of almost shovel ready. Yes, it'll have some revisions along the way due to certain input from ARB or Planning Commission, whatnot, as well as community stakeholders. But this is my opinion. This particular plan is not constructible yet. It still has to go through that permitting process. So it's detailed. Yes, we see all the proposed plants, proposed furniture that's there, our deck furniture. We just don't have structural engineering that would actually have to go through a permitting process. So though concept, though appears to be complete, it's not a constructible set of plans.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor, I'll also add that there was an initial design for this that was then, State Parks wanted it to be modified to accommodate sea level rise, which changed some of the design as well.
Yeah, thank you for pointing that out.
I think I remember from the presentation that the state park was requiring a very beefy foundation, maybe $1 million foundation or something. I mean, it was looked like it could be some caissons involved. Is that correct?
Councilmember Clark, that is accurate. We're going to be looking at these review comments, but one of the review comments is some type of deep foundation, because as you recognize, sea level rise, so does the state. This plan or concept has changed from a ground level type of improvement to a raised improvement because of sea level rise requirements by the state of California. So yes, you're accurate in that regard. We're looking at a deep foundation, and I don't know what that means in terms of cost and how that's going to affect the design or the scope of the work. So it's one of these, this is a project that perhaps might be a special case where we have to bring to the city council, perhaps maybe the public site facility committee to see what council's appetite for this project is. Because it's one of these projects where we're still early on in the phase where you may not want this project anymore due to a variety of reasons. Maybe the way it looks, maybe the deep foundations, all that cost. And yes, this is a project we'll probably bring in front of the Public Site Facility Committee first and then get gauge their appetite, so to say. Okay. Touching on funding source, Tidelands Trust Fund, and I mentioned about the state park grants. It's basically a restrictive categorized funding source. Moving on to the Carpinteria Community Pool Improvements Project. Again, I'll have Jeanette Gant here talk about some upcoming efforts of staff to get the needs assessment, the pool needs assessment implemented. So the general scope of work is pretty broad. It's kind of like the City Hall Campus Improvements Project. So we're looking at building, pool, and mechanical system upgrades. Jeanette has administered an RFP and came back with a pool's needs assessment plan, i.e. a master plan or a feasibility study that substantiates improvements for pool improvements. Right now, we would consider this still in the design phase, very early on in the design phase. And if you want to add to that, Jeanette, about the pool, go ahead.
Thank you, John. Yeah, you covered most of it. At your next council meeting, I'll be bringing forward a request for you to authorize the city manager to enter into an agreement with a firm to begin the design of the pool project. So that will be coming up. We did do an RFP, received 3 bids, selected the highest proposed. We received 3 proposals, selected the highest ranking proposer, and we'll be bringing it to your next council meeting for approval to enter into an agreement with them, and that will really get this project started.
I have a question about the funding portion of this one. I think there was an op-ed in the Coastal View a couple weeks back, and we have public commenters who have asked questions about why city reserves aren't being used for this project and why it's requiring additional funding sources to be found in order to sustain it. And so I just wanted to give staff the opportunity to speak to that a little bit and maybe try to clarify a little bit more for the public about why that is.
Yes, Vice Mayor Solorzano. So first I want to say that your council had actually, when we applied for the state grant, knowing that we needed a match, and at that time we had a couple of foundations that we thought were interested in supporting the project, but nothing had been confirmed since that time. We have had, well over $250,000 has been actually confirmed for this project, but at that time, we weren't certain, and the council did commit that if we applied for that grant, that we would use those reserve funds. Going back to one of the earlier slides about the restrictive, semi-restricted, and discretionary, one of the reasons why you definitely want to take advantage of projects like this where there is grants and donations and those sorts of things is because those are specific to the project. And when you're strategizing for how to fund projects, you always want to use that red box, the restricted one on those restricted projects. And that includes folks that are willing to donate for a specific thing because council has many priorities. And I know pavement is one of the ones at the top, and pavement is at the very bottom of donations and grants at the moment. And so ensuring that your council has as much discretionary monies available to be able to dedicate to those priorities that are very important to the community because everyone uses the roads versus maybe not for the pool. I think it's very important that you all maintain that discretion when budgeting. So that's sort of hopefully address that question.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And then also I think, especially with projects like the pool where it's going to be such a big undertaking, and I know that there are people who have already indicated that they want to donate and that they want to support it, but also there are also all these other funding sources that you mentioned that the city is actively has either secured or is seeking out too. So it's not like we're going to the public and asking them to finance the pool, the upgrades, but I know there are a lot of people who do want that will be a part of the funding, but then there's all these other sources too that are being brought together on this. And so I just wanted to bring some clarity to that because I know because it is such a big project and there are these different sources of funding for it. I just wanted to kind of underline that for people.
I'd also like to bring up, we talk about the needs assessments specifically on pools and just about all of our projects we look at. One of the things we look at when I say that we in Rotary also is we don't call them needs assessment anymore. We actually call them community assessments. And the reason we changed the name from community assessments or from needs assessments to community assessments is because we not only look at the needs, but we also look at the potential resources. This helps them with some of the budgeting. It gives us a little more foresight on where some of the funding would actually come from potentially, even in the long run. When we look at projects, we always plan on doing projects, but we plan on making those projects become programs. So projects are a one-off that happens one time, but if we could put a program together, that is a supporting factor for those, and we may want to take a look at doing that in the long run. For example, the pool may fit somehow within the parks program specific. So we're not looking at projects. We try and incorporate those into programs that are existing, more for long term than short term. Something to think about.
Thank you, Councilmember Nomura. This is a particular project that I believe, well, Jeanette and I haven't really talked about this yet, but it's going to be part of a program after this project. And just like our roads, we have a pavement management system. That's basically a program. We have a sidewalk maintenance program, a bridge inspection program. So this pool or aquatics facilities will have some type of systematic approach in maintenance of this very, very important asset. So like basically an asset management system.
And I'll just add on to that. We do have a program-based budget, and this is part of a program, but just the services, right? And I think what you're talking about is a program that not only includes the services, but the long-term maintenance and those sorts of things. So having a program that's just more encompassing. Thank you.
Okay, touching on the funding source again, development impact fees and revolving funds. Development impact fees, the aquatics of development impact fees is specific to this.
And I'm sorry, I'll add one more thing here. Because the funding is going to the Santa Barbara Foundation, you're not going to see those figures here.
And just a quick question on the pool improvements project. What is the most urgent need for repair at the pool?
Yeah,
Yes, Mayor Alcon, thank you for that question. The facility assessment identified that the cantilever gutters, in other words, the gutters along the edge of the pool where the water spills over, are the most urgent need, or is the most urgent need for replacement. Because it's part of the pool decking as well, it would make the most sense to redo the pool deck. So we would be mobilizing a contractor at the same time rather than having someone come out to just work on one small section of the deck around the pool perimeter. It'd be the entire pool deck. And I don't have the exact dollar amount right here in front of me, but I believe that project alone was estimated at like around $400,000 for the pavement or the concrete around the pool.
And with the deck in the state that it is now, obviously we're moving towards having funding to fix the deck. How many years does the deck currently have in its current state? Out of curiosity.
How many years remaining? That's a great question, Mayor Alcon. One which I don't think I'd be quite qualified to answer. I don't know when or at all the pool deck was resealed since it's been built, which would extend the life of it. I could find out that information. And that's a good question. I could definitely ask, should we enter into a contract with the designer? They have a sub-consultant who's obviously specialized in aquatics. I could ask them for their opinion. That's a great question. I know from just anecdotal observations of being at the pool and using the pool, it's crumbling. So there are portions where there's, gaps, and our public works department has had to replace missing pieces, if you will. Apologize, I don't know all the exact terminology. So it's definitely in need of repair. And a lot of the equipment that's running the pool, like the pool filters, which is where all the water filters through to be cleaned, are original to the building and the builds of the pool. And that's quite a long time for pool equipment and equipment that's outside in the sun and the elements. So it's been hanging on. A huge thanks to our Public Works Maintenance Department for helping, maintaining the pool and doing such a good job. But it definitely needs repair and replacement sooner rather than later.
Great, thank you.
Moving on to the Carpinteria Community Library Improvements Project. Similar to the pool project, it's a broad scope of work that includes upgrading the building system itself, amenities, upgrades, ADA compliance, upgrading of electrical, mechanical, plumbing systems, and general remodeling. For example, the predecessor of Eric Castro had a vision to have the actual entrance be at the entrance. And so that is a type of remodel there's no plans to it right now, but it's a broad scope of work, and it's a facility that's work in progress, just like the pool. In your tour, you saw just really small amenities that were completed, like, for example, the patio deck that is substantially complete. We're just waiting for the wrought iron handrails to be installed. And then you also saw the remodeled restrooms. Not only it was just a remodel, we also had some plumbing improvements to that. But it's not going to stop there. Like I mentioned, it's a broad scope of work. We're going to continue on with making improvements to the library. Right now, we do have a funding source of just the development impact fees. But we do have, I believe, maybe donations from the Friends of the Library? No? Okay. Strike that. Probably not.
To your point, John, there was a generous donation from the Friends of the Library towards the patio specifically. Yes, so you are correct. I believe it was in the amount of $10,000.
Okay. Thank you for that correction and clarification. Any questions regarding the library improvements project? I could pause here. It's about already almost 2 hours or so, Madam Mayor, but I could continue on with the presentation. If you would like to take your break.
Would you like to take a break?
Sure.
Yes. Okay. Thank you for that. We'll take a 10-minute break.
Sure.
Thank you. Hello all and welcome back to the Carpinteria City Council meeting, the City Council special meeting. And we will re-adjourn and we will start off with the 2023 pavement maintenance and rehabilitation project.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This project is currently in design, and the general scope of work really is all about pavement as well as drainage improvements due to pavement failures, as well as providing for facility upgrades, pedestrian facility upgrades, curb ramps and sidewalks as part of this project. So it is almost like a complete streets project without the landscaping. So we are addressing not only the pavement condition, and it's typically a poor condition when it comes to rehabilitation type projects, as addressing drainage because of the damage, or also pedestrian facility upgrades as part of the pavement, because as we try to have a risk management approach to these things. When you're there ripping up the road, might as well do sidewalks that are uplifted or curb ramps that are not ADA compliant. Though not shown on the presentation, I do want to read off the streets that are part of this project, and the streets are actually listed in attachment B of your staff report under the 2023 pavement rehabilitation project. Those streets are, in alphabetical order, Calle Raymar, Concha Loma Drive, Holly Avenue, Linden Avenue from the railroad tracks to the south end, Malibu Drive, Sawyer Avenue, Vallecita Court, and Vallecita Road. So those are the streets that are part of the 2023 pavement maintenance and rehabilitation project. I'll give you a little bit of background on this. Recall that the pavement improvements were based on an approach that your council has directed at the time city staff. That is, the approach is maintenance 1 year, rehabilitation the next. So basically, a light duty type of pavement treatment 1 year, which is the maintenance part. Just think slurry seal, and then the following year is a heavy duty type of approach, which is your rehabilitation, just removing and replacing the pavement. Just maybe a little bit more education on pavement on this. When it comes to slurry seal, recall the pavement condition index, basically good, fair, poor, and failed. When we slurry seal a road, it's typically in the fair condition to prevent the fair condition going into a poor condition. And then rehabilitation, that is basically a poor to failed condition. So that's a systematic approach of how we program pavement improvement projects. So maintenance, just think slurry seal. Rehabilitation, just think rehab, full heavy duty, removing and replacing that old pavement. So the 2023 pavement maintenance and rehabilitation project, obviously the name itself, we are behind schedule. And though it says on track, the design is on track. It's just, we just don't have the sufficient funding for construction. So the design, I am confidently say it is substantially complete. It's just a matter of going out to bid. Right now, the total estimated cost is $7 million. Again, design, construction, or design right-of-way construction phases. In this particular case, there's no right-of-way. We're not taking any right-of-way. There's no easements. Basically, it just went from design, and right now at the starting line, so to say, of construction phase. This is particularly an emphasis on where the funding sources are. The funding sources is very limited, and we are tapping into every single funding source that are not restrictive. They're semi-restrictive, but it's specific for pavement. So, for example, the RMRA, the Roadway Maintenance and Rehabilitation Account, that is state money. It's population-based formula. So what that means is, based on the population of a community, in this case, 14,000 population, the formula that the state of California has come up with is population-based, and the funds that you get from the state is commensurate to your population. So if City of Santa Barbara is going to get a lot of the share because of their population. We, as a small agency or small population, is getting a little. And I believe what is the RMI estimate, Lisette, about 300-something thousand?
For next year, or for
yes.
this, 330,000.
So that is commensurate to our population, 330,000 of RMRA. In addition to that, or in addition to RMRA monies, we are also getting our population formula-based share of Measure A money. So this is not the competitive grants part of Measure A. So Measure A, we are allocated a formula base, and that funding, or the funds, is commensurate to our population again. We also have we also have local transportation funds, but that's necessary for payment. We could use those for pedestrian improvements. We have development impact fees as well, and we also have Measure X to a certain extent.
Can I ask a couple of questions about that, the pavement, the 2023 project? Can you talk about why the streets you mentioned as part of that, why they're part of it and not other streets? Because I know, just looking at the date of the project, and then knowing that that's such a big concern for residents all around the city, to have the areas in front of their where they live, looking and being as safe as possible. How are the ones that you ultimately decide on chosen?
Yes, good question, Vice Mayor Solorzano. It's a question that City Manager and I have fielded many of the times, because this warrants context. So, prior City Council, we remember I mentioned about maintenance, then rehabilitation. That was the approach. In addition to that approach was our pavement management system divides the city, so to say, into zones. I believe we have 6 zones, and each zone, I think at the time, it was our council, in good faith, was trying to find something equitable that would go to each zone, because originally it was take care of pavements per zone. But our city council at the time was, let's pick projects, or pick streets, in every zone. And that's how we came up with the 2023 pavement maintenance rehabilitation list of projects. It was, at the time, it was an approach that was sound and reasonable, actually. It got the concurrence of council, it got me, as the Public Works Director, is like, that sounds sound. It seems that we could do that based on the funding that we had at the time. Maintenance rehab, finding the probably the failed or poor condition streets in each zone. And in every zone, I could tell you, there's a lot of poor and failed condition streets. Could we afford all of them? No. And cities have tried our best to provide or recommend certain streets to be part of a project. So the streets that I've mentioned earlier, it was based on that approach. We are changing that approach moving forward, because of times have changed, especially funding, and especially the funding that's tied to certain programs as well. So that is going to change. This project, the 2023 project, has those lists of streets. We're at a point in the design where we're basically finished. And I know during the tour, some of the council members asked, could we go back and start adding streets? And sure, we can. It's just now we have to hire back the engineer to design these streets. When we do go out to construction, we do have some leeway to include or expand the limits of a street. Like, for example, Linden Avenue. I mentioned Linden Avenue between the railroad tracks and the beach end. Could we go all the way a little bit further out? Yes, we can, because the design is essentially the same in that same street. But if you go from one street to a completely different street, and I'm just thinking out loud, let's just say we pick and a road, Kramer Circle, I'm just thinking out loud on that. And we don't know, the contractor, I could tell you this, like, I don't know what's there. You need a design, because there's a completely road that's not part of this project. And the contractors is usually right in that regard. We need to have a design before even a contractor goes out there, because the contractors usually relying on not just a simple pavement. It's like, I need the grades, I need the elevations, how is this road going to slope? There's some drainage issues, and the component about public outreach. We didn't outreach to that street. It's like, they'll probably be happy about it still. It's like, oh yeah, you're doing my street. But we still need to do that public outreach. So there's that component as well.
And then in terms of the finances, from what I just recall from the past couple of years being on council, what has the increase in costs of pavement been? That's been one of the really major construction cost expansions that we've seen. Is that right?
Vice Mayor Solorzano, through the mayor, it's been a combination of not only the increase to pavement, but also the increase to our public safety. So at the time when Measure X was passed, I think 2018, and started receiving funds in 2019, our law enforcement bill was about 3.9 million. Next year, it's predicted to be 7.5. So that's 3.6 million, and Measure X is expected to bring in 4 million. So after you account for the increase in law enforcement, there's only 400,000 left, which then goes into the negative once you add the library cost that was also part of Measure X. So you had the issues with Measure X, and I think what we thought it would be in terms of helping with public safety to a smaller degree, and the library, and a number of other things. So you started decreasing the amount of available funding through Measure X, and then also at the same time, construction was increasing tremendously. The 2022 pavement project was originally estimated for somewhere in the 3 millions, and by the time it was built, it was $6.5 million. And so it was a combination of the increase in costs of pavement and decreased funding from Measure X. And then, some of this stuff is a preview for what we'll discuss at our next meeting in terms of strategies, but also in terms of selecting roads. I think in my research saw that a fair road, to maintain a fair road, a failed road costs about 5 to 10 times more. So if you're able to preserve your fair roads as fair, say you have 10 of those versus one failed road. If you were to try to trade those out, it wouldn't be apples to apples, because one's 10 times more than the other. You'd have to remove a significant number of roads at the fair level. And if you don't do those 10 roads are each going to cost 10 times as much, and it exponentially increases the cost of the project. And so these are the strategies that we're all going to have to talk about at our next meeting as we look at our various conditions of roads at the PCI and which ones we want to tackle first and so forth. So it's not an easy question or answer fully developed, but one that we're working on.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that context. Thank you.
Thank you. So of the list of roads, you mentioned a number of roads, and then you mentioned 2 methods. Does each road get the maintenance, and then next year they get the full road replacement? Or do some of them get the maintenance only and some of them get the repair only?
Yes, Councilmember Clark, through the mayor. So as part of this project, we kind of hybrided. So there are streets that are just going to get slurry seal, and there's other streets that are going to be just the rehab. And I don't know if we're going to go with the approach like we had, maintenance and then rehab again. But once a particular street gets the maintenance, that maintenance or that slurry sealed street should last 5 to 7 years until it gets re-looked at or reevaluated, and hopefully it stays in the fair condition where we doesn't need a rehabilitation, because that's the whole point of getting it's more of a preservation technique or method. So.
So then is
Yes.
that cost potentially soft? I mean, if we don't really know what we're going to do on each one, or do we know which method we're going to use on each street?
The plans, Councilmember Clark, already identify which method to use.
Okay.
So, yes, so the method, it's already specified on the plans that it's going to receive the slurry seal.
Yeah.
Yes. And which streets are going to get the rehab.
And then Councilmember Clark, when we come back at our next meeting, we're hoping to have a figure for what the deferred maintenance is for all the roads in the city. I think, people have a small idea of what the problem is because we're talking about this as a single project. But if you look across the whole city, right, I think there's maybe even people here this evening that are looking at roads that aren't on this list. And so for us to get the full picture of what the deferred maintenance is and the cost that the city has to look to budget for, right, in the coming years, we're going to have to look at all of the streets. And so we're hoping to have that number for you when we come back to your council.
Like 300 million?
There are cities, you don't have to Google very far to find cities that have had pulled numbers like that. And so I don't think we're not in there. That's the one benefit to only being 2.5 square miles, but it's not going to be a small number. It could be north of $30 million.
I have a question. What is the estimated cost of just the design phase?
Lisette just showed me the design for this project is about $363,000 for the design. This particular information is in the CIP worksheet in attachment B. There's a lot of worksheets of the capital projects in attachment B.
Okay. And then my other question was in terms of, what was I going to ask? Oh, I just want to confirm, I think I've asked this question before, but I recall with the 2023 pavement maintenance, this project in particular, we're banking on receiving a grant. It was either a year or two ago, of which we didn't receive. So I just want to confirm there aren't any other additional grants out there that we could potentially apply for.
Madam Mayor, not that I'm aware of. The one that we were trying to go after was at the time during the Biden administration. They had a particular grants, but it was very competitive. And for what I understand is they looked at that administration looked at disadvantaged communities as a one of the criteria. And though we have pockets of disadvantaged areas, community areas, City of Carpinteria as a whole statistically is not a disadvantaged community. So that was a particular criteria that we fell short of. And then there was other merits that other communities throughout the nation. It was a nationwide competition, so to say. And a lot of communities, from my understanding, were like in the rural communities, were rural ag communities that had these particular funds. So right now, with the current ministry, we don't have federal aid funding for pavement. Right now, I've seen a piece of legislation, I guess you'd say, it's called the BASIC Act. I forgot the acronym of that. It's basically, but it's really for bridges and roadway safety, not pavement. roadway safety is like maybe a traffic signal warrant or something, or some roundabout. It has to do with traffic safety and not for pavement. So yeah, there's nothing that we could find at this time. However, I believe in the next session, our city manager and our administrative services will be talking about other funding opportunities like direct lending.
Mayor, I'll add to some of our neighboring agencies. Hopefully I don't get this letter wrong, but I think it's Measure C for Santa Barbara that they recently passed to to help with their pavement. And I also think Goleta recently passed something to take out $30 million in bonds. So these are the things that people are having to start to do now rather than to be able to rely on grant funding, unfortunately. There is work, as John mentioned, that you'll see that's related to a reduction of emissions or specific safety upgrades. And so you may see some grants out there and you might say, oh, there's tons of things for roads, but they're always very specific to alternative transportation or things like that. So when you do see us working on roads, those grants usually have one of those components to them, which is why the funding was available. But unfortunately, the position of the state's budget and then also at the federal level has been just one other factor that's impacted us here locally.
Madam Mayor, I do know I had folks here in the audience has came up to me regarding wanting to speak about the pavement project.
We have public comment scheduled
Okay.
after your presentation. I think if we want to allow public comment, I should be allowing public comment for all the other items we've discussed. So, I think I would rather just wait.
Okay.
Yeah. But we will allow public comment at the end of the presentation. Thank you.
If there's no other questions regarding the 2023 pavement maintenance and rehabilitation project, I'll move on to the Carpinteria Avenue Bridge Replacement Project. This project has been on the books almost as long as the Rincon Multi-Use Trail project. And this is a very simple scope of work. It's basically removing and replacing the existing Carpinteria Avenue Bridge over Carpinteria Creek. However, what wasn't simple is it was during the time of the right-of-way phase, and that involved acquisition of temporary construction easements, as well as there was a condemnation process, so to say, with an adjacent property that also delayed the right-of-way phase. To this day, I categorize the current phase of design because utility relocation is considered part of the right-of-way phase. And not, even though we did clearing and grubbing, I guess you could say that's part of construction. But this project has gotten a little complicated, in my opinion, because one is we're basically at the mercy of the utility companies relocating. And you've probably seen utility companies coming and going over the bridge, relocating poles, relocating facilities, but it's not a synced up system or process with our utility companies, because Edison is driving this right now. This is restrictive funding. So I mentioned about the highway bridge program. That's that grant. So that grant is restrictive category type funding. That's for this project. And the city staff, or the city, has also saved up funds from the development impact fees, specifically the highway bridge development impact fee, or highway and bridge development impact fees. So we are basically reserving those funds for this project in anticipation of the construction. Any questions regarding the bridge project? All right. Moving on to the Linden Avenue Improvements Project. This has, I'm actually proud to say, we are actually complete with this project. Our project manager, construction manager, Shay Darrington, is just wrapping up the construction cost accounting. And this particular project should go to your city council to file the notice of completion. We're looking at maybe next month as a conservative timeframe to bring to your city council to file the notice of completion of this project. I do have an image here in the presentation of basically the finished product. Any questions regarding this particular bikeway? I know there's some questions out there from the general public about why this bikeway is the way it is, but I could always explain why. No? Okay. I mentioned from almost at the beginning of our presentation, these are restrictive funding, and it's coming from the Circulation Improvements Program, or Circulation Improvements Fund, because of the Highway 101 project. No questions? Moving on to the Carpinteria High School Area Crosswalk Safety Improvements Project. This project, or the scope of work, basically is to remove the existing flashing beacon at the crosswalk and replacing it with a high-intensity activated crosswalk system, also known as HAWK system. That's basically a hybrid traffic signal. Instead of the red, yellow, green bulbs, you'll see red and green bulb. So how that works is a pedestrian presses the button, the red bulb flashes red, and in the rules of the road, that means be prepared to stop. When the red bulb is static, that's basically is a complete stop. And the green is what that is to proceed. So basically, we're just removing the yield feature of a flashing beacon into an actual stop feature of a crosswalk due to a couple of accidents. I believe you're aware of, we've had accidents on that crosswalk before, even with this flashing beacon. This project funding source, again, restrictive funding from a grant called the Highway Safety Improvement Program. That's specifically for roadway safety, which is this, and it's supplemented by development impact fees, traffic diff. Any questions regarding the crosswalk project?
Yeah, so I know that there's been a delay similar to with the Carpinteria Bridge replacement, a delay that's by someone outside of the city or an entity outside of the city. Can you talk about that delay and then when work is expected to resume?
Yes, Vice Mayor. So delay, thank you. It's not a major delay. So what had happened was, and no fault to the city or city staff, is the project received. Well, first of all, the project is situated on State Route 192, a state highway. So with that, the project had to apply for a Caltrans encroachment permit. The city received a Caltrans encroachment permit. At the time, on the second day of construction, the work was stopped by Caltrans because they apparently did not fully review the project plans, and it had to go back up to San Luis Obispo to have it reviewed by a certain specialty group up there because the proposed conduit, basically where the electrical wires are going to be run through, Caltrans didn't like the location on the plans. And why we were issued the permit, that still is beyond me. But fortunately, we received a revised permit. And I believe, Shay, we're going to restart the pre-construction meeting tomorrow? Or Wednesday, yes, Wednesday. So it's one of those things, pick your battles with Caltrans. I didn't pick this battle with Caltrans. Okay, we'll play ball, whatever, but we are being delayed. Mm-hmm. Fortunately, our contractor, Tor Enterprises, just pay me for demobilizing, or excuse me, just pay us for backfilling the trench that we already cut into. So we're remobilizing, and like I mentioned, or Shay confirmed, we're going to have reactivate this pre-construction meeting again on Wednesday.
And then once it gets started and they're kind of re-breaking ground, about how long is that expected to last? So the construction portion?
I have our project manager, Shay Darrington.
Councilmember Solozano, through the mayor, regarding construction schedule, about duration, I'm unsure at this moment. At Wednesday's pre-job or pre-construction meeting, I should be receiving a tentative construction schedule from the contractor, Toro Enterprises. So I'll have more information Wednesday or Thursday.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
We're going to also be putting that out in our city newsletter and social media because it's construction. We have to notify a lot of people.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Shay. We've come to the mid-year capital improvements program budget. I'm going to pass the mic over to Lisette Maldonado.
So I'll just interject really quick. I think this would be a good opportunity to open up public comment for all of the project status updates, and that will give an opportunity for any guests in the audience to make public comment.
You want us to talk now?
Yes, it'll either be now or it'll be at the end of the entire presentation.
Appreciate it.
Great, thank you, welcome. And I'll just ask for you to complete a green speaker slip when you're done.
Oh, okay, sure. So the owner's talking to whoever he's talking to right now. Oh, push. Hello? Okay. Yeah, so we live over on Holly and Sawyer corner, and our street is obviously one of those that was mentioned today. And we came in and talked to Shay last week or a couple weeks ago that we had a letter in the mail, come and talk, to see what's going on with that project. And we got an overview of what's going on, the plans, all that kind of stuff. And the one thing that concerned us, and again, it doesn't look like the budget's that great to do this for a while anyways, but when it gets done, they want to do parking on our side of the road. And I don't know if you guys know where Sawyer and Holly comes together. There's a kind of a bad corner there. And we're right on that corner. There's a driveway. It basically goes, there's two driveways there. And to have parking there, we kind of think it's a safety issue for the width of the road that they're going to be talking about here. It's 29 feet after they put in the curb. And what we're hoping to not have parking along really that whole side of the road. That'd be the whole, I don't know what direction that is. I guess south, west, the west side of the road?
Yeah, I don't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah, no, this is the,
But what you have here, when you're coming down Sawyer, you have a 39-foot wide road. As you take the corner into Holly, Holly is a 29-foot road. So we lose 9 feet. Then the people on the other side have built a sidewalk and have a curb, and they have taken 5.5 feet. So now, and then on our side, we're using that same 5.5 feet. That's where you come up with the 29 feet wide asphalt road that you're going to build, because right now Holly is basically a non-existent road. It's more like a dirt road path. But the point is, it even gets, as you go down the road, it becomes even down to 24.5 feet, because you've got a big drain and 2 telephone poles that you don't want to have to move. So what we're saying is that once you put parking on the side that everybody's parking now, which takes about 8 feet, so the 29 feet becomes 21, then you put parking on the other side, our side of the street, even though it's a curb that you can drive on, but you're gonna what? Drive on half of my lawn instead of, all of it? So you're still 4 or 5 feet out in the road. What does that give you back in road width? You've got the numbers? 29 less 8, less another 4, what are we down to? 17. Most people believe that you need 12 feet wide. They make some roads 11, for cars to go back and forth. We don't have it. It's 17 feet wide. So when people come down this road and they're going to take a left, and the fire truck is sitting there, bam, they can't even get through. I mean, it's a real safety issue. So the simple solution is no parking on the right side, and right now you have signs that say no parking, but for whatever reason, they're not adhered to. Because people park there all the time and no tickets.
I will give you maybe an extra 10 seconds if you'd like to.
I'm done. I'm done.
Okay, thank you for your public comment.
Yeah, okay, fine. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank
Very,
you.
very much. We came to the conclusion we were at the wrong, we shouldn't have been presenting and talking to you at this time. They were still in the design phase. We'll work with these boys to see whether we can make a design change. If we can't, then we'll come to you, okay?
I appreciate you all taking your time this evening to be here with us. Thank you.
This guy's a good guy, though.
Yeah, Shay's a good guy.
Shane told us to come to the meeting.
I'd like to, I do not have any other speaker slips. Do we have anyone via Zoom?
Mayor, we have no Zoom speakers.
Okay, I'll close public comment in relation to the project updates, and we will move on to the capital improvement program budget.
Okay, good evening, Mayor, members of the council, and members of the public. As you just heard, Public Works has provided an update on the status and timing of the city's capital projects. The financial adjustments presented tonight are directly aligned with those updates and reflect changes in project timing, funding allocations, and actual grant award amounts. Additional detail is included in the staff report as attachment C. We'll be presenting the mid-year capital improvement plan budget report along with the proposed appropriation adjustments. This report was reviewed by the Finance Budget Committee on their meeting on March 26, and the committee recommended forwarding the proposed appropriations to the City Council for consideration and approval. This slide shows total revenue adjustments for the Capital Improvement Project Fund, broken down by account name. So we have, under the state grants, we have a decrease of $363,950, primarily due to corrections to reflect the actual grant award amounts for the Linden Avenue Beautification Project and Carpinteria High School Crosswalk. We also have a decrease in federal grants, a decrease of $5,734,000, largely due to the construction rescheduling of the Carpinteria Avenue Bridge Project, partially offset by an increase in Franklin Creek CDBG funding. Charges for service increased by $350,500, reflects development impact fees collected year to date. Overall, total proposed revenue budget for the Capital Improvement Project Fund is $4,648,000, representing a decrease of $5,750,000 from the current budget of $10,398,000. The next slide is our total expenditures and transfer adjustment for the Capital Improvement Project Fund, broken down by account name. Major capital projects decreased by $7,110,000. Largely due to the rescheduling of the Carpinteria Avenue Bridge Project, Linden Avenue Beautification Project, and Carpinteria High School Crosswalk. Again, the total proposed expenditures for the Capital Improvement Project Fund is $5,690,000, representing a total decrease of the $7,110,000 from the current budget of $12,801,000. Transfers decreased by $142,100. The decrease is due to the changes in the timing and scope of the capital projects, as well as adjustments for actual grant awards and the use of available development impact fees. The total proposed transfer in budget for the Capital Improvement Project Fund is $690,000, representing a decrease of $842,100 from the current budget of $1,532,000. This concludes my section of the presentation, if you have any questions.
All right, with no questions, I'll take it from there. Good evening again, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Council. Tonight, I'll be speaking about several upcoming capital projects that staff will be proposing for inclusion in the mid-cycle budget. These projects are being brought forward at this time primarily due to the availability of restricted funding sources such as grants and donations that are specifically earmarked for these efforts and cannot be used for other purposes. In the case of the dog park project, this effort builds on prior council and planning commission direction following a pilot program that has proven successful and supports moving forward with permanent installation. Additionally, some of these funding sources are time sensitive, so moving these projects forward now allows us to take full advantage of these opportunities. The first project I'll speak on this evening is Rincon Bluffs, also known as the Bluffs 3 Trail Project. Not to be confused with the Rincon Multi-Use Trail. This project will include non-motorized trails, a parking lot, a restroom, and interpretive signage. A conceptual design was created several years ago. However, it will need to be updated to include the Rincon Gateway property. The city is currently in discussions with the Land Trust regarding deeding that property over to the city. And as you know, and John spoke on earlier, the city did receive an $800,000 grant from the County of Santa Barbara to go towards the bluffs, and some or all of that funding could be used for this project. Additionally, there is an endowment fund for the Rincon Bluffs that could also help support this effort. There are funds available from the Land Trust for the initial improvements to this property, which originally needed to be spent by 2025, but we were granted an extension from the Land Trust. However, there is a time clock on these funds. The next project, or I'll pause there in case anyone has questions on the Bluffs 3 Rincon Bluffs project. All right. Moving on is the next project you heard of recently at your last council meeting is the Tamol Interpretive Play Area Repair Project. In the current fiscal year, the city had about $12,000 budgeted for improvements to this play area. However, a slide was unfortunately damaged beyond repair and required full replacement, which ended up costing around $9,000. The cost of that replacement utilized almost all of the available budget. But the city did recently receive a generous donation from the Morning Rotary and Lions Club specific to the Tamol area interpretive play area improvements. The Morning Rotary will be launching a fundraising campaign to help support the city with this project, which includes full replacement of the rubber surfacing, repairs or replacement of play amenities and needed, and repainting of the bridge and play structures. The next project is the creation of a permanent dog park. The scope of work is to design and install a permanent off-leash dog park. This project is currently in the design phase, and the plans are being reviewed by the Community Development Department for completeness before moving on to the Architectural Review Board for their review. The current estimated cost for this project is $200,000, and staff anticipates using development impact fees to support the funding of this project, as well as any donations that may come forward. And the final project sorry, did I say a question? My apologies.
Just looking at this cursorily, I'm just curious, does this increase from the size of this dog park increase from the size of the temporary park?
Councilmember Mayor, through the mayor, I believe so, yes. It will extend more towards the west, toward where the entrance is currently. And I believe it will also stretch out a bit more towards the east. I don't know if you've been there, there's a little bit of a hill that this permanent dog park might likely encapsulate. Can't think of the right word right now. I apologize.
I understand the topography of what I'm looking at, and I was like, pleasantly surprised to see that it kind of had grown. So
yes, and the design as it is right now does have a separate section for small dogs versus large dogs. The temporary dog park right now is for all. And And it's pretty common in dog parks, at least that I have frequented, to have a large and small dog area separated. And so that's part of the reason for a bit of the expansion.
Thank you.
And if I could just ask a quick question. So this is, some of the design was in response to the community outreach, asking people to fill out that online survey, or I think they had written copies too, indicating like what style benches and what they thought would be in it. Is that, so that's reflected in this design?
Yes, Vice Mayor Solorzano, through the mayor, that is correct. Josefina and Tori hosted a community outreach workshop. I apologize, I cannot off the top of my head remember when that was. Josefina presented different design options on poster boards. They gathered feedback in person on paper surveys. There's also an online survey that people could take if they weren't able to attend the meeting, and it was up for quite a while online, so people could take the survey at their leisure. And Josefina incorporated some of those design elements as she could into the design that she is putting forward to community development and the ARB eventually.
Thank you.
And then the final project that I will be speaking on tonight on the horizon is the replacement of the El Caro Park playground. This playground is aging and some design elements have been damaged. The wood chips around the playground and swings prevent children with mobility challenges from accessing the structure, and the current design is not universally accessible. The scope of work would be to replace the entire play structure and swings with a universally accessible playground. And staff are confident that there are grant opportunities for the replacement of the old playground with universally accessible playgrounds, and we'll be keeping our eyes open for any potential funding sources. And that concludes my portion of tonight's presentations. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
I have a question in terms of the playground. If you can just share, I mean, obviously, can you share how this particular playground was selected? Although you did share that there were some pieces of equipment that were broken. But I think what I'm more curious about is if there's been an assessment of all the other parks, and because I can imagine they're all aging as well.
Yeah, Mayor Alcon, that's a great question. So there has been an assessment of all the playgrounds in the parks. We have our risk management firm, CJPIA, did a loss cap, so a survey of citywide of potential risks, and they identified various facilities or amenities or policies or procedures that needed to be updated or created. Also, two of our staff, if I'm not mistaken, on the Public Works team have recently become certified playground inspectors through the California Parks and Recreation Society, which is wonderful. That was one of the recommendations from CJPIA as well, that we have a certified playground inspector on site, and now we have two. And prior to even that certification, which they just got this month, they have implemented monthly playground inspections. I attended the first one with the Public Works maintenance staff, and we have a check sheet, which they do now, and check off all the different elements of all of our playgrounds so that we can make sure we're kind of getting ahead of any potential maintenance issues or concerns, and that's pretty standard practice and what I've seen in other cities as well. We're also talking, I've been in talks with the Public Works manager, Ryan Airley, about working to find a way to maintain the rubber surfacing at some of the newer playgrounds. If we're able to seal it frequently, it can extend the life of the rubber surfacing. And so we hope that we can, map out maybe one playground a year, if you will, so we could put some sort of sealant or coat on that surfacing to extend the life, so that we don't see what we're witnessing, experiencing at Tamol, which is some pretty serious need of repair and disintegration, if you will, in a relatively short amount of time. Although I will say, with Tamol's high use and location, it's done a great job thus far. Playgrounds only last around 20 years, but considering the proximity to the ocean and how many people use that area, it's understandable where it's at right now.
Perfect, thank you. And then just one other follow-up question. With this park in particular, the restroom, I know is in need of some maintenance. How do you all assess the restrooms? Do you, for example, the park and the equipment, do you look at the park and the equipment as well as the restroom on site? Or do you all assess that differently?
Mayor Alcon, that's a great question. I'm not sure I'll be able to fully answer that. Maybe John might be able to help me out with what the maintenance staff do in regards to the restroom. I personally am looking more at the playground structure, the fields, the recreational type amenities, if you will. But we are aware that the El Carro Park playground or restrooms are in need of some repair and upgrading. There was some significant damage to the men's restroom maybe about a year ago or within this calendar year. A year ago. So John, I'd turn it over to you.
El Carro Park restroom, there's actually it's part of the 5-year CIP. Unfortunately, it wasn't programmed in this fiscal year to make any refurbishment, or really it needs a rehab, the restrooms. So right now, we have it identified in the CIP, the 5-year CIP. It's like many of the projects in the 5-year CIP, it's not programmed in this fiscal year. But it could always be, your council could always reprioritize that. And when we go to the next session of updating the 5-year CIP.
Is that a type of capital improvement project where grants are readily available?
Possibly. It could, usually these projects or this facility, we would obtain state parks. There's a lot of, because it's part of the park system, El Carro Park, I would say it would fit under some type of state parks grant. And state parks has a lot of grants when it comes to parks. We'll research on that when that time comes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just a couple comments on that last conversation. So, pointing to some of the nuance in the funding sources available, we have funding sources that are available for new things related to parks, but not necessarily for using a maintenance of existing things. And so sometimes that can be frustrating when I know we have funds to put a whole brand new restroom if we wanted to, but not monies to necessarily fix the one that we currently have. And then this is also, as you all have been up there thinking ahead about how these the interdependence between all these various projects and maintenance and ongoing costs. One of the other things, as we start looking at places to reduce costs with all of our budget constraints, I know that, for example, this bathroom was destroyed one time when it was left open. There was a period of time when we were just leaving our restrooms open. And so as we start to look at reducing service levels and we think about, maybe we can reduce the cost of sending, the folks around at night to close all of the restrooms, I've already in my own mind, as I'm thinking about the various things we reduce, thinking about those unintended consequences and impacts of, say, where we recently increased our contract cost to lock these bathrooms, and if we were to pull that back, what that might mean for, repairs to a bathroom. And so doesn't apply to our conversation this evening, but as we brought it up, I think it's just a good thing for us all to consider. Up on the screen is just sort of a final visual for everyone. The pie chart on the left talks about our existing CIPs by percentage. So to no surprise, Parks is up there with 61% of the projects. That's because the majority of the funding, which you can see on the right with the funding sources, with the maroon colored ones being the restricted funding, the purple being the semi-restricted, and the green being discretionary. We are heavily reliant on those restricted and semi-restricted funding sources, which are more available for parks, and then also, as was mentioned earlier, transportation projects specifically related to bicycle and pedestrian. The 1% that you see there for pavement is related to the design, and then a nominal amount for our facility. So you can see the dollar figures there. These are the adjusted dollar figures after, if your council approves those budget adjustments this evening. And then again, on the right, you can see by percentages. And in the bottom right-hand corner, just a couple takeaways for people. So 99.9% of the city's current CIP budget comes from those restricted and semi-restricted funding sources. Those, again, are limited to project type or a specific project. Of the 99.9%, 75% is funded by state, county, and/or federal grants. Those are in the very restrictive category, only for a specific project. An example that John gave earlier was the Carpinteria Avenue Bridge Replacement Project. The reason why it's important to move forward with those when we have the opportunity is for every dollar that that we invest, the federal government is matching $9 for that project. And so if we were to try to do this on our own in the future, it would be nearly impossible to do it without that type of match. And so that's as the community looks to why we prioritize certain projects, it's important that we leverage all the tax dollars that we can, and we do that by putting them with grants like this one. And then finally, this is just a recap of what John said earlier, is that the funding for pavement is mostly population formula based. And because we have that small population, I think Lisette mentioned it was somewhere in the 300,000s, which is really unfortunate because no matter how many people live in a city, it costs the same amount to repair the roads. And it just means that there's fewer tax dollars coming from your base. So it's a little bit of a double-edged sword there for us. And then, the funds that are available for roads are restricted to those purposes. And again, I just touched on that, and I put it here in this graphic. I think it was shared by staff. It was shared by you all. But in case people prefer the visual or it's picked up by the paper, this was here is just a couple takeaways for folks. And so with that, happy to, I think, yes, answer any questions that the council has.
Looks like no questions. We asked a lot of questions, though, during the presentation. I really appreciated the thought and effort you all put into making this presentation. I felt like it was really easy to understand, very comprehensive, and very transparent as well. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll give kudos to Stephen Downs and Julie Sobriones for their help in putting this together.
Great. Okay, if there aren't any other questions from council, I will open up public comment. I do not have any speaker slips, no one in the audience.
And Mayor, we have no one on Zoom.
No one on Zoom, so I'll close public comment and bring it back to the council for a motion.
Is this receive and file, or if I can just ask for clarification?
There's two parts to this. There's a receiving the report, and then there is the motion related to the mid-year budget adjustment for the CIP.
Perfect. I move to receive the mid-year CIP update and approve the recommended appropriations adjustments.
Second.
Great, we have a first and a second. Roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Clark? Aye. Councilmember Mayer?
Aye.
Councilmember Nomura?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Solorzano?
Aye.
And Mayor Alarcon.
Aye. Okay, and with that, it is 8:07 and our meeting is adjourned.